More than 5,000 Black activists, artists, scholars, students, and over 150 organizations have signed a statement of Black solidarity with Gaza. They include such luminaries as Angela Davis, India Moore, Mark Lamont Hill, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Robin D.G. Kelly, and more. And among the organizers of the statement is my guest, Corey Peterson-Smith. Corey is the Michael Ratner Middle East Fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. He writes about U.S. empire, the war on terror, solidarity with Palestine, and anti-racism in the U.S. He's a contributor to In These Times, The Nation, Truth Out, and Common Dreams. And his latest op-ed in Yes Magazine is called The Roots of Black Palestinian Solidarity. Welcome to the program, Corey.
Thank you, Sonali. I'm grateful to be here.
Why is there this connection, if you will, between Black Americans and Palestinians? In your story for Yes, you write that it can be traced pretty far back to the mid to late 60s.
That's right. I mean, really, what you have in this country is an ongoing Black freedom struggle that started from the very, very beginnings when the founders of this place called the United States introduced enslaved Africans. That kind of moment of oppression was also a moment of resistance. And ever since, there has been a freedom struggle to try to get free. And in Palestine, when the founders of the Israeli project found that project through violence against Palestinian people, through the forced expulsion, through terrorizing, through just unreal levels of violence that continues to this day, there began a Palestinian freedom struggle, or that was a beginning of a freedom struggle in Palestine that also continues. And so we've seen across history these convergences. And on one hand, the forces that keep us down here in the United States, they're in collusion with the Israeli forces that keep Palestinians down. U.S. police departments train with Israeli forces. So they're working together. But it's also the case that our freedom struggles converge too, that we find each other. And that has happened throughout history. And this is just another moment, another chapter in that long and proud history of mutual solidarity for mutual freedom for Black folks and for Palestinians.
This is not the first statement in solidarity with Palestinians, right? Tell me about, I believe it was 2015, when you helped to organize a statement in solidarity with the people of Gaza and with Palestinians in general.
That's right. And that project actually began in 2014. We published it in 2015, but the origins really lie in the fateful summer of 2014, which was when, among other things, Mike Brown was murdered by police in Ferguson, Missouri. And Ferguson rose up. We had the Ferguson uprising, and that coincided with the latest Israeli bombardment of Gaza in 2014. And so that was this moment of horror and violence, but also resistance and solidarity as Black folks rose up in Ferguson and Palestinians in Palestine sent messages of solidarity, sent statements of solidarity, and sent suggestions on social media about how to deal with tear gas and things like that. And so there were Palestinian folks in the streets of Ferguson marching with Black folks, against police violence. And so that was a moment of connection. And the year that followed was one in which there were number of delegations of folks from this country to Palestine, but in particular of Black activists going to Palestine and making connections. And so a year later in 2015, we issued a solidarity statement from Black folks here to Palestinians.
And so when we think about how there are these commonalities and struggle, this is it's kind of strange when you look at it from the perspective of pro-Israelis who, have a different perspective, right? And it really matters who's telling the story and who's telling the history. There was an instance, or there was a time when there was some Black solidarity with Zionism, and you even see folks calling attention to or trying to find parallels between the indigenous land back movement and Zionism. But how is that undermined by the facts of the occupation today, when you have a country that has as many weapons as Israel does and is controlling all the borders, to then say it is the one that is the victim?
So, first of all, if we're talking about struggles for self-determination, which, yeah, there's a pro-Israel argument that Israelis they're simply expressing their self-determination. A few years ago, they actually passed a law called the nation state law that said that only the Jewish nation has the right to self-determination in that place that they call Israel. And yeah, I mean, there's so many, I think, pretty straightforward problems with this, including, as you say, it's pretty clear that Israel is occupying Palestinian land with checkpoints, with an army, a navy, an air force, none of which Palestinians have. There's no Palestinian checkpoints that control the movement of Jewish Israelis. There's no Palestinian navy. There's no Palestinian tank corps or air force, et cetera, et cetera. But the other thing is, when you look at the history of self-determination, when you look at that time in the 1960s, the 50s and 60s, a high point of decolonization and national liberation struggles around the world. Where was Israel? Was Israel on the side of the decolonizing countries in Africa and Asia and Latin America? No, Palestinians were. Actually, Palestinians were in alignment with those decolonization struggles. And actually, Israel was lined up with the United States, with South Africa, with European powers, the colonial powers, et cetera. So it's pretty clear where they stand. But I think the question you asked is extremely important about why has there been this effort by the pro-Israel folks to try to make a connection with the Black freedom struggle, or try to present an alignment with the Black freedom struggle, or claim that Israelis are actually expressing, an indigenous political project. And the fact is that those two things, the Black freedom struggle and the struggle for indigenous liberation, are struggles that have faced centuries of oppression and also have a lot of moral authority. Like, we recognize the incredible importance of the Black freedom struggle, of the abolitionist struggle, in terms of being a force, a moral force, and a force for political progress in the history of this country. The civil rights and Black power struggles, how important they were in terms of driving a whole era of freedom struggles, right? And similarly, all the ongoing incredible resistance of indigenous peoples have been a reminder of the violent reality, the violent foundations of this place called the United States, and actually the fact that freedom and democracy have yet to manifest, particularly for the people who were here first, before the United States, and the people who were enslaved to provide a foundation for the U.S. economy and U.S. society, right? And so it's that moral authority of the Black freedom struggle and of the indigenous struggles that Israel, they want some of that. They want some of that cachet. They want to say, oh, yeah, we were, Martin Luther King was with us, or we're just indigenous peoples. They're trying to claim to be part of that kind of decolonization. And history, and definitely the contemporary reality, what they're doing in Gaza, makes it very clear that they are really the opposite. These are the forces of colonization and oppression, not freedom.
Let's talk about the massive march that took place over the weekend. I mean, there have been ongoing protests since Israel began its latest bombing of Gaza. But the one that took place on Saturday, some consider the largest gathering on U.S. soil of a solidarity march with Palestinians, or pro-Palestinian solidarity march. What does that represent to you in terms of the tide of public opinion?
Yeah, this represents a breakthrough, and it's been a long time coming. I mean, before this latest episode of Israeli bombardment of Gaza, of horrific violence, for years prior, there has been a building identification, sympathy, and solidarity with Palestinians in this country. The widespread success of Students for Justice in Palestine, which means that if you have gone to college in the past decade, you have encountered activists who are asserting Palestinian humanity, the success of the BDS movement, which is led by Palestinians and has invited people all around the world to find their way in their communities, on their campuses, in their neighborhoods, in their cities, with their retirement funds, et cetera, to divest from Israeli apartheid, to boycott the companies that are part of our lives that also buttress Israeli apartheid. These things have been incredibly successful, and it means that a conversation around Palestinian rights has been very widespread. And I think that things like the movement for Black Lives, which has, again, forced people in this country to confront institutionalized racism here and how deep it goes, the fact that it is rooted in histories of slavery and colonization, people have learned a lot actually over these years watching and participating in those struggles in the streets here, and then look over at Palestine with new eyes and say, oh, wait, maybe this isn't that complicated, actually. Maybe this, too, is a racial justice struggle or a liberation struggle. And there are some things, of course, that one has to learn that are specific to Palestine, and also some things about this that are familiar. And so all of this was in the background prior to this latest round of violence. And in particular, younger people and people of color and Democrats have tended to sympathize with and be in solidarity with Palestinians. And so we are seeing, in the midst of this absolute horror that Israel is committing, again, Israel is revealing itself, and it is revealing its whole project to many, many people. The fact that they have cut off electricity and fuel and water and food to Palestinians in Gaza, the fact that they are bombing schools and mosques and hospitals, all of this combined with a kind of background that many people have where we are more open to seeing Palestinian humanity and standing with Palestinians in their humanity, that is all culminating in this outpouring of solidarity that we're seeing. And in particular, yes, the largest march for Palestinian rights in U.S. history.